Hey there. So, we live in a tiny Japanese apartment, and in order to make it work to be creative in such a tiny space, we had to come up with some ideas. And maybe you can use some of them as well, whether you're in the same situation as us or you're having a big property. So, first of all, I always dreamed of having a dedicated space, a spare room, an atelier, an arts and crafts room, a workbench, whatever, just a place to be creative. But the reality is that for me and many others, having something like this might be an unobtainable goal. And that might sound sad, but just not having enough space should never stop you from being creative. So here are some solutions that we came up with to have the possibility to be creative in our small space. And today I'll use synthesizers to make some music, but the ideas that I'll present today, they work for any type of creative pursuit that you want to do. Whether it's be making your own jewelry, draw elephants, or give haircuts to your pets, it doesn't really matter. So number one is space. We only have one table in our apartment that we use for everything: eating, writing emails, cutting fish, and repotting flowers. So as a general rule, we established that when not in use, the table is always empty. Like no plates, no groceries, no letter, no nothing stays on the table when it's not in use. When you think about it, it just makes sense to have like a blank canvas that you can use for any type of activity instead of having a dedicated space just for one activity, because that blank space can be literally anything. And I see it so often that people, when they have like a work area or a craft room or something in their house, it ends up just being cluttered and unusable because you acquire so much stuff that you put inside, and then that space shrinks so that you cannot use it for the initial intentions that you had. So having a dedicated blank space that can be used for anything is our step one. So let's move on to step two. Step two is the setup and preparation time. It's literally essential that you can put up all the things that you need within 5 minutes and then properly store them away within another 5 minutes. Because if it takes any longer than 5 minutes, like if you have to walk to your storage closet or somewhere outside or whatever, then you probably won't start being creative because you just feel like it's a drag to start. So everything needs to be really close, be really reachable, so you're able to set up your work area in a very short amount of time. And as well, clean up in a very short amount of time. I think 5 minutes is a very good goal. It doesn't sound too long, but you can actually do a lot in 5 minutes. So moving on to step three, which is organize. In order to be able to set up and clean up your workspace in that short amount of time, you absolutely need to have a dedicated space for every single item you're using. And while that might sound like a lot of work, it actually isn't. So growing up, I hated tidying just like anybody else. But once you start building some habits, it kind of really comes all together. So what I'm doing is I'm having these many drawers where everything is always in its dedicated space. And that saves so much time because you don't end up searching and looking for things. And for some things, I use those acrylic drawers because you can easily see what's inside. But I think that just comes down to personal preference. What helps me a lot, especially with cables that always get tangled, but in reality probably works for any type of small item, is that I use those very simple, cheap Ziploc bags. And then everything is in its own Ziploc bag, so I can see what's inside and you can easily reach it. And for cables, they don't tangle. So it's really a game changer for me, and it makes life so much easier. And then step four is actually building habits. And that might sound a bit weird, but it's actually super important. Because one thing is, if something is stored away really well, it's so easy to forget about it and don't get it out ever and don't use it ever. And that is like a trap you should not fall into. So really going back to your things, getting them out, draw something, paint something, make some music, whatever, is really important. And on the other hand, once everything is set up, it's really easy to say like, oh, let's just leave it like this. I'll come back tomorrow, or I come back to it later. But that doesn't work in a small apartment either. So it's really about building those habits of getting stuff out and then putting it away in its dedicated space. So it's really essential to set a specific time frame to be creative if you want to be creative and at the same time only have to pay for a small apartment. So yeah, that's basically it. This is a very short video, but I hope you like it. If you want, you can stick around and listen to what I made today. It's not that good, but it feels good that I could set it up and clean up in way less than 5 minutes. So if you want to stay and listen, that would be nice. Thank you.
じゃあまたママに叱られるよ高校生の靴してって